Today we're going to talk about 5 killer tips in Lightroom CC. So we're going to talk about some really cool things, and I'm going to show you a couple tips and tricks, and I think a couple of these things go under the radar. So, if you're around on the web, there's a lot of videos out there talking about how to use Lightroom. A lot of people are using Lightroom, but there's still features that people that either don't know about or they're just not used very often. Maybe it's something that's buried in the menu system or something like that. Now, there's some other things we'll cover today out of the 5 tips that I would say are maybe common knowledge when it comes to using Lightroom and using Lightroom to process nature photos. But I think I'm going to take a few of these a step further, and I'll just show you some really cool uses. So again, we're going to talk about 5 tips, and this is going to relate to nature photography because that's what we do. So we'll talk about 5 tips. Most are related to processing. We will start out talking a little bit about organization, mainly when it comes to filtering and culling images. But I'm going to show you some cool stuff today, and I think we'll cover the entire spectrum too. A lot of this might, a lot of this is going to be applicable whether you just started using Lightroom or you've been using Lightroom for a decade. So really great tips here. So the first one we're going to talk about, number 1, using Auto Advanced. So using Auto Advanced relates to kind of filtering, sorting, going through your good and bad images, because we all have good and bad images, right? We go out on a workshop, we go out on just a trip for ourselves. We take, say, 100, 200, 300 photos, right? A lot of different images. Not every single one of those images is going to be a winner, right? We might have some great images, we might have a lot of good images, and then there might be some bad images and images we simply just don't want to keep, process, even have on our computer. So in my opinion, that's kind of the first step after we get out of the field. We actually take our pictures, we import them into Lightroom. The first step is really going through what's good and bad, and really those 2 buckets. Is this a good photo? Is this something I'm going to keep, or is this a bad photo? So I'm going to show you how to use Auto Advanced because this tip will save you a ton of time, and this is actually exactly how I handle my images after import. So Auto Advanced, it's one of those tips that's kind of buried in the menu system. There's 2 ways to enable it. So the first way is simply by toggling caps lock on your keyboard. If you want to go through the menu system, you go up to Photo, and down here you're going to see Auto Advanced. So you can also click to check it on. So you can check Auto Advanced on. Now what I'm going to do is, before we actually talk about it, I'm going to turn it off and just show you what happens without it, because I think it's easier for you to see why this is such a useful feature. So we can see my catalog. I have 90 photos, right? 90 photos. Let's say I just took these earlier today and imported all of them. Now my next step is going to be using some type of rating or marking system within Lightroom to kind of pick what photos I want to progress on with, actually process, and what images I maybe want to discard. So personally, I use the flagging system. So there's a couple ways you can use this flagging system. The easiest way is keyboard shortcuts, and I'll show you those. But if you're in Library and you have one image singled out, in the toolbar here, you'll see there's a flag, and then there's a flag with an X through it. So these are the 2 designations. You can flag as a pick, and you can see when I highlight over it, P on the keyboard will also do that for you. Or you can reject a photo, and you can do that by pressing X on the keyboard. Now the one they don't show you, the keyboard shortcut they don't show you, is U. So let's just say, let's work with this image. I'm going to press P on the keyboard. And you'll see Lightroom comes up, gives me a message, says it was flagged. In the top left corner here, it'll say the photo's flagged. There's an icon of a flag. Now say I did that by mistake and I want to unflag this photo. I can press U on the keyboard. It'll remove the flag. But these are the keyboard shortcuts I use. P to pick. So P is to mark a flag on an image. X is to reject. Now you'll see what happens. If I just press, I'm on this image again, if I just press P, it flagged this image. And what I have to do with Auto Advance not turned on is I have to manually progress to the next image. So I flagged this one. Let's look at this image. Well, maybe I don't like this image as much, and I press X on my keyboard. I set as rejected. When I do that, you'll see that icon with the flag with the X through it, and it's grayed out, right? Now again, I have to continue to move on. So I have to continue to move on manually. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to press U. I'm just going to remove the flag for both of these. Now, check this out. Let's go up to Photo. Let's turn on Auto Advance. Now watch this. Okay, so I'm going to start with this image. I'm going to use the keyboard shortcuts P to pick and then X to reject. So let's just say, I like this image. I'll press P. Look at what happened. It automatically advanced to the next image in the series, right? So here's it. It's this first image marked with a flag. Instantly, as I marked that image using the keyboard shortcut P, I progressed on to the next one. So I could press X. Let's say I don't like this image. Again, instantly moved on to the next one. Yeah, I don't like this too much. So I'm just going to continue working through these images using P to flag and X to reject. And you'll see, it's making my life so much easier, right? I instantly can go through multiple images in little to no time by using those keyboard shortcuts in Auto Advance. Now, Auto Advance also works with the other qualifiers or designations you can make. So that would be the rating system, so star ratings or color ratings as well. So if I use the numeric keyboards, the numeric keystrokes on my keyboard, for instance, if I press 1, that'll set the star rating for this image to 1, and it instantly will progress to the next image. Now, if I set this image, let's say I want to set label to red, same thing, it's going to move on. So no matter what qualifier you use, with Auto Advance turned on, and remember you do that by pressing Caps Lock or going up to Photo and simply checking Auto Advanced, whatever designation you make on an image, it's going to go on to the next one. Now, I'll show you the reason I like to use flags. I think this reason really sets it apart from the other ones. So culling images is a huge part of what we do, right? Especially when we're doing something like wildlife photography. Maybe we've taken, 200 shots of a brown bear. Really, there's only 10 or 15 in there that we really want. So we're going to have a lot of images that we're going to discard, right? We're going to get rid of them. We're going to cull them. Now, the reason I like to flag and mark as rejected is watch what I can do with the images I've marked as rejected. If I go up to Photo, I can go down to the very bottom and look at this option here, delete rejected photos. So I just did what, like 10 or 12 images, not many. But if you're working with like 500 images and you've rejected like 200 and you want to remove them from your catalog or delete them from your computer, that's a pretty lengthy process. So if you use the flag qualifiers, if you flag an image that you really like and then you reject a photo that you want to get rid of, at the very end of all that, you can come down here to this delete rejected photos option and select it. And it's gonna basically throw all your rejected photos in this container, and Lightroom's gonna ask you, do you want to delete these 4 images from the disk? Okay, so it'll basically ask you, do you want to remove these from your disk, which is permanently? You will also have the option to choose just delete from your catalog. So you can actually choose, okay, do I want to just remove them? So do I want to delete from disk, which it'll take the original image on your computer, put it in the recycling bin, it's gone. Okay, so you remove the original. You can also choose just remove. And remove is simply going to just remove these images from your catalog. The originals are still on your computer. So important designation here. But look how easy that is. I just rejected these images. If I want to delete them totally, I can. If I just want to remove them from Lightroom, I can do that as well. So that's tip number 1, using Auto Advance, and kind of the bonus tip within there is use the flagging system, especially if you find you like to mark your good images and say cull or remove your bad images. This flagging system will really help you. Okay, The next one, the next tip we're going to talk about is we're going to jump into the library module. Okay? So, I'm sorry, we're going to jump into the develop module. And this is tip number 2. So tip number 2 is called, I'll just call it try auto tone. So I know a lot of you out there, your skill probably varies greatly within Lightroom. Some of you might be experts, some of you might just be starting out. I know it's kind of all over the place. Now, this is kind of geared towards you beginners, but one of the toughest processing questions, is what do I do with an image? Where do I start? What do I do? So this can be really helpful. If you come into the basic tab here in the develop module, okay, basic tab. Now the basic tab, we have things like white balance. We can change tone, which is, think of it like luminosity and contrast. We can make some presence adjustments, which is kind of micro contrast, and then some color adjustments as well. Now within the basic panel, there's this auto button here, and this is auto tone. And I highly recommend this even if you are a more advanced user. If you come, this image has no adjustments made. So if I want to think about the types of adjustments, or maybe see, well, where should I start with this image? A really good starting point is just clicking this auto button here. And what the auto button is going to do is it's basically going to kind of dissect the histogram. It's going to say, okay, this is what the RGB histogram looks like. This is what the tonal histogram looks like. And Lightroom is going to use algorithms and make some adjustments only within the basic tab. So only within the basic tab, but it's going to make some adjustments. So look, you can see tone changed, a little bit of vibrance. And if I just toggle before and after here by using history, here's before, here's after. So maybe not perfect, but it gives me a really good starting point, right? And if I want to make some other adjustments, maybe I can adjust highlights, maybe it brought up my shadows too much, maybe I want to darken them, maybe change white balance a little bit. I can do a variety of things, okay? But try clicking auto. I also want to mention too, so these tips we're going through, we are going to have basically registration for our premium Lightroom course. It's going to open Monday, August 24th. And remain open until August 27th. So if you like these tips, you want to learn more, in the Lightroom course we really dive into, pretty much everything you could ever want to know about using Lightroom for nature photography. So keep that in mind. Registration opens on Monday. Now let's try out a different image, right? Let's check out auto on maybe a wildlife image. So let's go to this brown bear here. Again, no adjustments have been made, and I'm just going to click auto. And look at that, right? It really added some pop. I mean, I think this looks pretty good. And again, if there's things I need to maybe kind of fine-tune and adjust, I can move some of these sliders around. I can alter things. Maybe it's too much contrast. Maybe I want, even more contrast. But auto, let's just go back to where we were. This was no adjustments, raw file into Lightroom, and here was auto, right? So, highly recommend it. Beginners through advanced users. If you come to an image and you're just struggling with where to start, try just clicking the auto tone tab. It doesn't mean you need to accept all of these changes. It just might give you a better idea of where you should take your images or where a good starting spot might be. And for instance, for this image, I mean, if I do before and after, I think that looks pretty good. Let's go to before. Here's before. Here's after. It's really added some nice pop, right? Okay, so that's tip number 2. Try using the auto tab within the basic panel as a good starting point, or even just to see what happens with your image. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is range masking. So, range masking is a way to make very selective adjustments within Lightroom. And oftentimes when we talk about making selective adjustments, Photoshop is the place we want to do that. But Lightroom has had some recent updates within the last year or two that have really elevated Lightroom's ability to make selective adjustments. And we're going to talk about being selective really in these next 3 tips. So tip number 3 is use range masking for selective adjustments. So let's look at this image. Let's think about what it needs. It looks pretty good. The highlights in the sky, though, are a little bit bright. The sky is just a little bit bright. Maybe not blown out, but too bright. So one thing I might do is grab a graduated filter here, and I'm just going to pull it over the sky. Something like this. And now let's make some adjustments to this graduate filter. I'm going to reduce the exposure a little bit and a little bit of the highlights, right? Maybe I'll make it a little bit cooler as well. Just a little bit. Okay, so that's kind of solved our sky issue, right? You know, the sky looks a lot better, but at the same time, this darkening of exposure, this recovery of highlights, this has affected this lone tree in the middle of our frame, right? So this tree before the graduate filter was properly exposed, was looking good. Now, it's a little too dark, it doesn't look great, right? Well, the very cool thing with the graduate filter, with the radial filter and adjustment brush as well, is we can go to the very bottom, and there's an option for range mask. So we have two options we can use. We can choose color or luminance. So I'm going to choose luminance, and luminance means I can basically control where this grad filter applies its effect being this darkening adjustment. So I can choose where that effect's applied according to the luminance of the image. So what we have basically is this range slider, which is what we're going to work with, and then smoothness. Think about this as like feathering or the transition. We're just going to leave this at 50. But what I like to do is I'll toggle on the show luminance mask. In this red overlay we see, that shows where the adjustment is being applied currently. So you can see the whole sky, the tree as well. Now what I can do with the range box is I can move this slider, this is my black point, and this is my white point. And if I move my black point to the right, that basically keeps the adjustments out of those darker tones. If I move the white point to the left, it's going to keep the adjustment out of the brighter tones. So let me toggle this off. Let's think about what we're trying to do. We wanted to decrease the brightness in the sky, but nothing else, right? We don't want that darkness really affecting this tree. So let's toggle on that show luminance mask. And what I'm going to do is just grab this black point for the range, and I'm just going to move it to the right. You're going to see we're seeing some recovery in that tree, right? So it's not as red. There's still some of that adjustment being applied, but not as much. So I might toggle the mask off, and I might just try and eyeball it here. So as I move it to the right, some of those darker tones are going to be eventually spared by that darkening adjustment. So let's say something like this, right? Let's see if we can do a before and after. Here, let's, I think we're right here. So this is before, and this is after. And basically, we've just spared that tree. You can see some of the shadows have been recovered by applying that luminance mask. Basically, here, so this was before. This was after the luminance mask. And you can see what's happening is a little bit of that darkness in that tree is being recovered, right? We're getting it brought back. So range masking, a great way to control where you want an adjustment applied. We're going to walk through one more example with range masking. So I'm going to go to this image. And with this image, I really like the clouds up here. Let's say we just want to add a little bit of warmth, maybe a little bit of magenta to these clouds, really get the sky popping. Don't really want to affect too much else in the image though. So let's use another grad filter here. Okay. And let's just pull this over the sky. And I'm just going to add some warmth. Maybe let's just overemphasize a little bit of warmth and magenta, something like this. Okay, again, I really only want that in those clouds. I don't really want too much of it in the sky over here. So let's go down to range mask again. And let's toggle on, let's choose color this time. So color works just like luminance. It's going to basically restrict an adjustment only to the areas we want. So with luminance, it was, just say the brighter areas or darker areas. With color, we're going to use this color picker here. We're actually going to choose what colors in the image we want this adjustment applied to. So there's a couple ways you can do it. You can simply click once, you can pick a color. That worked pretty good, right? Let's look. So this is before, and this is after. And this is before everything. This is before that adjustment. This is after. See how we've selectively been able to just apply that warmth and magenta to the clouds, and the clouds are looking really great. And this is without a color range mask. A lot of orange warm cast over here, right? So using just range mask set to color, picking a point in the sky, we maintain those nice cool tones here, but really have some nice cloud color, right? Now, another way we can use, 2 ways we can use the color range selector. If we want, we can actually hold down Shift and we can pick a couple different areas. And again, the areas that I'm picking, that's where the adjustment will be applied. Now, the last method is you can left click and you can hold and you can actually drag and you can draw either a square or a rectangle, and everything that's within that box, any color within that box, that's what will get the adjustment. So really it depends on the image. I actually think clicking on this one, clicking on the clouds here once works really well. Other times you're going to find, drawing a box like this is going to work much better. But I really think just clicking once works great. Can click done. And again, let's look at, this was before anything was done. And this is after. We've managed to really add some nice color to those clouds. Okay, so next thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about tip number 4 here. So tip number 4 is using the masking slider in the detail tab. So if I open up the detail tab in the develop module, we're going to talk about this slider right here, masking. Now this masking slider relates to the sharpening adjustments. So I think that the masking slider is one of the most powerful in Lightroom. So let's look at this image and let's look at the settings we shot this at. So 1600, I'm really just looking at the ISO. So 1600, that's pretty high, right? We're gonna have some noise in this image. Anytime I apply sharpening to a high ISO image, you're gonna introduce more noise. I can even take out that second part. Anytime you sharpen an image, you're gonna add some noise. So what we need to be careful about is, it's fine if we're adding a little bit of noise, but we want to make sure our sharpening is really doing something, right? And in this image, we really want to make sure we're sharpening the bear's face. If we can bring out some really nice details in the face of the bear, that's fine. We get a little noise as a byproduct, that's okay. Now what we don't want to do is add more noise here in this low detail kind of blurred area, right? Not in focus. So we don't want to sharpen this area. So the masking slider is really going to help us here. So let's just zoom in, look at the bear, and I'm just going to add some arbitrary numbers for sharpening. Let's just add, maybe 100 points, radius of like 1.5, and let's just look where that gets us. So this is before, this is after. So you can see, I think the radius, let's maybe bump it down a little bit. And let's just look here. So here's before, here's after. So a very, very fine, fine sharpening, you could say. Here's before, here's after. Just bringing out those small details. And let's just overdo it. Let's just leave it at around 100. So let's say I've applied some sharpening, right? I've applied the sharpening effect. I really like how it looks in the face of the bear. But remember, we don't want to sharpen some of these low detail areas, and that's where the masking slider really comes into play. So at first, it doesn't look like it does much, right? I grab the masking slider and move it left and right. It's kind of hard to visualize what's going on with it. Now, I'm going to change all that for you. What I want you to do is next time you use the masking slider, hold down Alt if you're on a PC, hold down Option if you're on a Mac. So I'm going to hold that key down, remember Alt or Option. Now let's left click the masking slider. And you see we get a white overlay. So let's talk about what we're seeing. When it comes to masking, and masking simply refers to applying an adjustment selectively across an image. So applying adjustment to certain areas of an image and removing the adjustment from other areas. And one of the things you always hear about masking, I stress it all the time, is white reveals an adjustment black conceals an adjustment. So right now, if we hold down Alt or Option, we got this white screen, right? So white is revealing that adjustment. And what adjustment are we talking about? We're talking about the sharpening. So all, the amount at 97, radius at 1.1, detail at 25, with the masking slider set to 0, it is basically revealing all of that sharpening adjustment across the entire image. Now watch what happens when I hold down Alt or Option and move masking slider to the right. Let's just look 60 points. Let's look at this. Again, let's think about what this mask overlay represents. White reveals, black conceals. So look at what's happened. Now, a lot of the detail in the face of the bear, it's white, right? So it's still getting that sharpening adjustment. Look at the background though. Really separating the background. The background's black, shades of gray. It's getting much, much less of that sharpening adjustment. And as I continue to move the masking slider to the right, we just see more and more of that. So look at now, even at like 87 points, I've got a great sharpening mask, right? A lot of the hair and the fur on the face of the bear is getting that sharpening, and that's exactly what I want to be sharpened. And at this point, a lot of the background is black. Black is concealing the sharpening adjustment. It's not being applied there. So super powerful slider within the sharpening interface within Lightroom. Highly recommend using the masking slider. And we'll just do one more quick peek. We'll look at a landscape image. I'm just going to adjust these. Let's say we're applying same thing. Let's say 100 points of sharpening. We'll just leave radius and detail as is. Now with a landscape image like this, we really want to sharpen some of the fine details in the highlights, especially on our edge, right on that horizon edge. Maybe we don't want to sharpen as much in the shadows. So let's see if we can use the masking slider. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option, click the masking slider, and let's just drag to the right. So look at this, right around here, right around 50 points, right? A lot of the highlights, especially the edge of this mountain in Zion, getting a lot of that sharpening, right? Sharpening is being applied at those fine edges. A lot of the shadows and that soft sky, not getting any of the sharpening, right? Black conceals. So this looks great for me. I can release, and now I zoom in. Really nice sharpening now in the details of the mountain. Not so much though in that soft sky and in the shadows here. So that's tip 4. Try out the masking slider in the sharpening tab. Really fantastic. Okay, tip number 5, our final tip, is use auto mask when you're using the brush. So when you're using the brush tool, try using auto mask. So let's look at this image. With a lot of landscape images, usually there's this contrast between the sky and maybe whatever landscape mountain feature we're shooting in our foreground and midground to background. And a lot of times we want to process maybe the landscape area different from our sky. So let's grab the brush, and let's say I want to make adjustments to these structures, our landscape. What I'm going to do is, with the brush open, I'm going to go down. Well, we can change size to whatever. We'll leave feather at 100 and flow at 100. And I'm going to check auto mask. So I'm going to check auto mask. And what we're going to do is try and make a nice selection for just this midground, foreground here, and leave the sky out. So what I'm going to do is check this box here. It's going to help us. I'm going to choose Show Selected Mask Overlay. And what that's going to do is I'm going to click here to paint. It's going to show me that red overlay that indicates where my brush strokes are going, what's getting, basically the red area. If I change settings in here, the red area is going to get those adjustments. So we want to make sure auto mask is checked, and I'm just going to paint here. And check out this. We're going to have to fine tune a little bit, but I've got a big brush. I'm kind of going into the sky, and we had a little bit of a screw up over here, but look at the edge over here. It's pretty much perfect against the sky. Now we're going to have to go in here and clean it up a little bit. So I recommend with the painting brush, check auto mask. Now if I want to erase, I'm going to hold down the keyboard shortcut Alt on a PC, Option on a Mac. And when I do that, it toggles between basically my primary brush and my eraser brush. You can see when I hold down Alt or Option, I have that minus sign within, right? So I'm going to hold down Alt or Option. At the same time, I'm going to navigate over here, make sure Auto Mask is checked. I want to check for my primary brush and the eraser brush. And now I'm just going to come in here and try and fine tune that. It's not perfect, but look at, usually this is something you do in Photoshop. So again, I'm getting pretty close. I'm actually going to change the size. I released Alt or Option. I'm going to change the size on my other brush. I'm going to try and get in here and just clean up those last remaining areas. So it is a balance. It's a balance between using the erase brush and the primary brush. But look at now. Look at like a perfect selection, right? So if I toggle this off, now if I come up here, if I want to maybe brighten these or maybe decrease their brightness, add a bunch of clarity, I can, the point is I can do whatever I want, right? I have a perfect selection made for this area. And at the same time, I could have come in here, if I check this box on, I did this for kind of the landscape. I could have just as easily, used the auto mask feature and just painted for the sky. And I could do that if I wanted to make specific adjustments for the sky. Now we can look, let's click done here. We could look at an image like this as well. Usually auto mask works really great for wildlife images where there's a nice contrast between the wildlife species and the background. So I could grab my brush here. Remember, I want to make sure auto mask is checked. Let's make it a little bit larger. Check this box. And the keyboard shortcut for this is O on your keyboard. So you can press O, that'll check it on and off. But I like to use this because it's going to show me where I'm painting, okay? And again, I'm just going to paint over a wolf here. And I'm being careful, but not super careful, right? And look at how good it's doing. It's pretty amazing. Now, I'm going to release. I could try the legs here. I think the legs are going to be a little difficult. I can do a pretty good job, though. So something like this. And if I turn the overlay off, and now let's say, I really want to add some contrast and some clarity maybe just to the wolf, not to the background. Look at that. Here's before, here's after. I've just added some clarity and contrast, but a very selective adjustment, right? Again, if I press O, look at that. It's like perfectly isolated the wolf against the white background. So, highly recommend tip number 5, using auto mask basically for wildlife and landscape images. Try out auto mask, use it for your primary brush and your erase brush. Lightroom's come a long way. It really does a great job. So, I hope you guys enjoyed those 5 killer tips for Lightroom CC, specifically for nature photography. Let's just review. So tip number 1, use Auto Advance for sorting and culling images. Tip number 2, try out starting with Auto Tone. Tip number 3, use range masking for selective adjustments. Tip number 4, use that masking slider while sharpening. And then tip number 5, use auto mask with your brush strokes. So, hope you guys enjoyed that. Let us know in the comments if you have any questions or enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching today, and take care.